box over here. So we will get this meeting started. Nala Kadic Wajak Mort, Kayan Karak Nija Walilap Buja, where Jinang Wajak Kadijin, where Knitting Bula Yeye. So we acknowledge the Wajak people as the traditional owners of the greater Fremantle Walilap area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. On that note, the city received advice this morning that one of our elders, Reverend Sam Diner, passed away last night. Reverend Diner is a Noongar elder, musician, cultural teacher, and he spent his childhood as part of the Stolen Generations in Roland Mission in the southwest. We have permission to use his name tonight from his family. In 2020, he was quoted as saying during Reconciliation Week, "Today is a time to remember and is an opportunity to enact justice of the 3 R's, recognition, rehabilitation and restoration. Like God's grace through, which is with all us all the time, reconciliation should be with us all the time, not just in 1 week." So tonight we'd like to thank Sam for his contribution in the development of the Walilap Reconciliation Action Plan. He was a very active member of our eldership group here at Walilap, and he'll be sorely missed. So we just might take a moment's silence for Sam Diner. Thank you. So attendance, apologies and leaves of absence. Councillor Thompson is on a leave of absence. Councillor Pemberton is an apology due to illness. Do we have any applications for leaves of absence? I forgot to give notice of this, but I would like to apply for a leave of absence from the, I'm going to say 12th to the 19th of July. I'm missing FPOL, I believe. So I'll move that and ask someone to second it. That's all right. Seconded by Councillor Graham. Thank you for letting me go on holidays, Councillor Graham. It was impromptu, but exciting nonetheless. All those in favour? Thanks, that's unanimous. Any other applications? Anyone else remembered a holiday they might have booked? Councillor Sullivan?
It's not certain, but I may be away from the 17th of July for at least a week, and so that would presumably take in the council meeting. So if we put it down from the 17th for 7 days.
I'll second that. And all those in favour? Thank you. All right, that's leaves of absence. Does anyone have any disclosures of interest on tonight's agenda? Councillor Sullivan and then Councillor
Thank you. Just an impartiality interest in FPOL 220610, the South Fremantle Footy Club licence. I am a paid member of the football club as of this year, but obviously that doesn't involve me in any of their decision-making processes or the like. So I will intend to stay and vote on the matter. Excellent.
Councillor Graham?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, it seems to be working. Same, likewise, disclosure on FPOL 220610, South Fremantle Football Club. I've been a long-standing member of the South Fremantle Football Club, and similar to Councillor Sullivan, I will be declaring an impartiality interest and staying in the room.
Excellent. Councillor Kamada?
Okay, I'll make it the trifecta. I also have an impartiality interest, FPOL 2206-10. I'm also a member of the South Fremantle Football Club, and will stay in the room to vote. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other members of the South Fremantle Football Club? Good stuff. All right, responses to previous questions taken on notice are published in the agenda. That takes us to public question time. I haven't had anyone register for public question time, so we'll carry on. I haven't heard of any petitions, but if anyone has one, now would be a good time. Nope. Deputations, none. Special deputations, yes, one. I'd like to invite Joe and Tom Fisher, who you may know from Clancy's, to talk to us about the Princess May Park proposal that they're planning to put forward.
Yes, okay. Hello? Yes. Hi all. Oh, where do I hold that, Tom? What's the best way to that far away? I've got the expert here on using the equipment. So Joe Fisher and Tom Fisher, we've been at Clancy's for a very long time, 35 odd years, and we would like to present a proposal for a bit of a development and forward thinking for that Princess May Park. This is what we're here for tonight. Will be very short, so I will keep this very short and leave the rest to Tom. So we in this report, which I think people may have this copy in their hands. This is an overview of a proposal which we feel will really help planning for the Princess May Park, which we have been a part of for 30 odd years, and we'd love to see something happen from now. So we thought, let's have a go at it. We outline the importance of the site here, both historically and as a central green space in the eastern part of the city, as well as a really important gateway statement, we feel, for people walking traffic coming from the east into the town. So that's really where we base this overview of the park development. And if this 10-minute overview of the potential development is favourable, receives a favourable hearing, we would obviously present a full development plan in conjunction with the city, including costs, budgets, timing and detail around the measures proposed in this document. I'm not going to speak to all of the items we've got here. It's just an introduction of why we want to do this. We think this is it could be a great thing for the future of the eastern part of Fremantle to provide a central green space, fully activated with a lot of interesting things happening there, allowing the future developments, people living in there, and us as tenants alongside the Fremantle Education Centre and Dada, who are both based in the park. And there's issues there which we've raised around some of the safety issues of the park and the sort of the lack of. We think that the park could greatly benefit from a bigger activation of it as a central part of a safe corridor into the town. So I think that's what this is about. I don't really need to say too much more. Tom's been talking to quite a lot of people to see if there's a support around it. So we do have support of the Fremantle Education Centre, who've been there 35 years, and we do have the support of Dada to be looking at measures to make it a safer space to be, as well as very interested in the development of it. But Tom's been dealing with quite a lot of people, talking to a lot of people to see if there is a broader support to this. So I'll let him talk to that.
I said 2 minutes. He went way over 2 minutes. Thank you. Since my uncles became publicans at Clancy's Tavern in 1988, we kind of feel we're already unofficial custodians of Princess May Park. With our brand and attention to culture and community, the majority of events programmed have been by myself and supported by Clancy's, from our Fremantle Folk Festival to strange things like very Clancy things like dog shows and log chops, nights, markets, kid events. I could go on there for the many things we've activated, but the potential for a beautiful City of Freo event space is definitely a huge untapped potential, I feel. From a business sense, obviously for us it would be beneficial to Clancy's to show growth, particularly with the recent spike of liquor licences granted in recent years. We feel like we need to probably show some growth as a very long-standing family pub, but also we see it as an opportunity to be a wonderful recreational Central Park style opportunity for our clients, neighbouring businesses, existing and proposed residential expansion at our end of town, which I think is probably on the cards planning-wise. So far, we've engaged and received great advice from Mayor Hannah, Josh Wilson, have been in discussions with City of Freo people like Jennifer Cooper, Ethan Kelly, Matt Hammond, the engineering team. We've been in regular contact, as Joe mentioned, with our neighbours, Dada and Fremantle Education Centre, to work in their desires and concerns. Dada has 180 clients. Fremantle Education Centre has 1,800 students roll through there a week, not obviously all at once, but 300 a day, I believe. So it is a well-populated sort of part of town. Most of their concerns stem around safety and security. We see beautification and population of this area as the best and most Freo method to address this, rather than over-policing and that sort of thing. Yeah, as I mentioned, I engaged Ethan Kelly, the Aboriginal Engagement Officer, who then invited me to present to the local elders at the last RAC meeting, which was a great honour, and express our desires to have localised Indigenous theming, potential renaming we'd really like to consider, and art and culture all championed in Princess May Park. We're particularly looking at the Dingo Dreaming story, which is focused on that end of town as a fantastic Dreamtime story for Fremantle. And we also met with Marissa Verma today to discuss potential native gardens and working within the Noongar seasons and that beautification along those lines. Along with that, we've been engaging lighting specialists, electricians, engineers to get ideas of how to look at decorative tree lighting, but with a thought of safety and security tied into that. So we see it as a bit of a three-phase plan. The first one, we're getting some plans and quotes on nature play, which I'll happily send through, and then looking at lighting up the trees. And obviously the southern part of the Princess May Park would be sort of subject to development there with the hotels, circus and that sort of thing. So a bit more in the council's hands, I suppose. But yeah, we kind of feel we're the unofficial custodians of the park. A lot of people call it Clancy's Park. I have to correct them, say it's Princess May Park, who was Princess Mary of Teck, for those who don't know, who visited once in 1901, and she was married to a duke. So that's where the name stems from. But Clancy's and the Fishers.
It's all good. Thank you. Now, I understand, thank you so much, Joe and Tom. We can ask questions of a special deputation. So if any councillors have any questions for Joe and Tom, they're welcome to ask them now, or they're pretty easy to find. Councillor Lang? Sorry, Councillor Archibald. Let's see whose hand that was.
Just for recording purposes. Can I just ask the funding for the project? Do you have thoughts on this one?
We have thoughts on that one, and we have only just, if we had this further, we would have to work in conjunction with the Shire to facilitate these things happening. We understand that the budget is tight, and they have been forever, and absolutely understandable. But we feel that there needs to be a push that we can help provide a push to that. We'd love to be able to come to an understanding on if this gets some sort of thought and thinks it's a good idea, we'd love to develop up ways that could happen.
Thank you. Excellent. Good. Well, feel free to stay. I mean, we've got a pretty exciting agenda. Or go. Up to you. Still injured, aren't you, Tom? Yeah.
Thanks very much. I would like to stay, but I've got my daughter who's up here, and I'm pleasantly surprised that I'll be able to make it. So thank you very much.
Enjoy. Good night. Okay. We don't have any presentations, so I'll move that we confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting with council dated 25th of May 2022, seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Thank you. All those in favour? Yep, that's unanimous. Elected member communication. Did anyone have anything they wanted to communicate? Councillor Lang, were you putting up your hand to tell us it's your birthday? No? Oh, good. Very kind. I have a couple of items that I would like to mention. On Monday night, I hosted as the lead Mayor for Peace for the Oceania region, which I only found out I was after being elected. I hosted a fairly large group of people here who joined a ICANN international, I'm trying to get the words right here, Congress Against Nuclear Weapons meeting that was live streaming to Vienna, where there is currently a meeting of the parties who are a party to the international treaty to ban nuclear weapons. We've been a member for quite a period of time of this organisation. What's significant now, I think, is that the Australian government have sent a delegation to Vienna to be an observer of that meeting, and it seems that there are steps towards, I guess, ratifying that international treaty. I hosted our local federal member, Josh Wilson, who spoke on the issue, as well as Jordan Steele-John, who's the Green Senator for Western Australia, and Joe Valentine, former Western Australian Senator, and quite a lively, large group of local people who are deeply involved in the peace movement on Monday night. The other thing I wish to mention, we didn't get a prize, but architects, Kerry Hill Architects, won the largest, most significant top prize at the Australian Institute of Architects WA Awards a couple of weeks ago, which, you know, it's hugely significant. So they won the George Temple Pool Award. They also picked up the Julius Elisha Award for Interior Architecture. I think that was the Interior Architects. Geoffrey Howlett Award for Public Architecture. John Septimus Rowe Award for Urban Design and Accommodation and Sustainable Architecture category, and we were also recognised with the Heritage Architecture Award for our architects who did work on the Fremantle Town Hall. So for those of you who have been on the journey a long time, making decisions that got us to this point, these are some really significant commendations. We hosted a tour yesterday of the Office of the Government Architect, and the number of tours are increasing in frequency, and they were blown away. Again, yet another group of people who came through and said this is just the most amazing piece of civic infrastructure. So just noting that. Okay, let's get into the reports. So Planning Committee dealt with all of their business themselves. Well done, Planning Committee. FPOL, we have a number of items come through to us. So we'll go through them, I suspect, in order. I suspect we'll have people talking on all of them. So let's start with FPOL 22065, Meeting Procedures Policy Review. I'll move the officer's recommendation. We have a seconder for that one. Councillor Archibald. Was there any discussion on that one? Good. I'll put that one to a vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Okay, FPOL 22066, Council Code of Conduct, Division 3, Complaint Handling Policy Review. I'll move that, and seconded by Councillor Archibald. There was some discussion, I think, about this one at FPOL, but does anyone wish to speak on it now? Councillor Kamada?
Thank you, Mayor Fitzharding. Yeah, I've got, I suppose, a question, just to clarify in my mind. It's more for the governance officer, and it's do minor breach offences come back to the city for adjudication at a cost as a result of not having a local law? And just to be clear, am I right in understanding that if the presiding member deals with a breach immediately, this is avoided?
Through the chair. So the minor breach system is dealt with by the Department of Local Government. It comes through the complaints officer at the city and is dealt with that way. This minor breach of this Division 3 policy, they come to council for consideration or as council dictates. So this policy states that the complaints officer will consider these complaints. One of the primary reasons for amending this policy was the expense related to the last policy when we sent out all of these complaints to an external investigator. At now, the intention is that the complaints officer will deal with these complaints, and it will take a similar or a like time of officer hours to consider these as it would for a minor breach through the Department of Local Government.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Councillor Groom.
Yeah, I just want to kind of acknowledge the work that's happened over the last 6 months, like to get the original policy in place and then to make sure we're learning from our experiences. And I think this feels kind of more fit for purpose and balanced and kind of the right scale for the kind of matters we might get in. So thank you to the officers for the work.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, should we put that one to the vote? All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Excellent. Okay, we're at FPOL 22067, which is the adoption of the City of Fremantle Cat Management Amendment Local Law 2022. Some of you may have seen an email that I sent out later this afternoon after uncovering some confusion about what the FPOL discussion and decision was on. What I have suggested is that I will move the amended officer's recommendation that's printed on page 32. So I'll perhaps get a seconder, then continue. Councillor Lang. In fact, you could probably move it if you wanted to, Councillor Lang. And yep, you can move it and I'll second it. Perhaps by way of explanation rather than speaking on it, I could just note that FPOL, there was a degree of confusion as to whether the list of parks was what was being debated or voted on, or all areas across the city. In fact, the vote was on all city property. So what I just would like to do is foreshadow that if this is not supported, if this is voted down, I will move the alternative officer recommendation as the headline on page 27 in the agenda, which is the prescribed areas list version of the world. So any clarification before we get into the debate, I just do want to make sure everyone's really clear where we are. So what we are debating is the amended officer's recommendation. We're talking about all city property, and there's an additional point 3 which refers to the restraint or containment of cats when on city property, which would be determined under our property local law. Yep. Over to you, Councillor Lang.
Thanks. What we're voting on at the moment reflects the motion we moved in October last year to investigate prohibiting cats on all city property. The motion that we're voting on reflects what we advertised to the community, and it reflects the overwhelming feedback we have in support of banning cats from all city property. So I'm extremely comfortable that what we're voting on is what our community wants to see. In terms of the confusion, if there is any concern amongst the elected members that perhaps this gets put forward and the state government don't give us permission to adopt this law, we can fall back to the alternate recommendation that Mayor Fichardi just mentioned. So what I'm proposing is we go forward with the mission that we've been on since October. We go forward with the mission we advertised and the community want us to go forward with. And if that doesn't fail, then we can come back to that list of 90 odd parks, which is a slightly extended version of what we have at the moment. It's pretty much what we're in place at the moment. So I would like to actually, if there is confusion, I'll stop speaking now, but if anyone's got questions, I've spoken to Charlie this afternoon, and Charlie's happy to answer any confusions around any particular nuances in the cat law, and perhaps some nuances that other local governments have been going through at the moment. Because since we went out on this journey, councils in Australia have been following our lead and going even further, and they're all now trying to put cats on leads and enforce containment. But Charlie will explain it better than me. Unfortunately, what they're asking isn't possible under the Cat Act. So I might hand back to the group to see if anyone has any questions for Charlie.
Perhaps in terms of chairing, questions to Charlie, but also Councillor Lang can obviously speak in closing as well. So if you're raising questions for Councillor Lang, he could address them then. Other speakers?
Just on the issue that's before us here, that we have this amended recommendation that the officers have put forward, and just what it implies and how different it is to the one that, I mean, and in asking it too,
Could you pop your mic on?
Sorry. In asking the question, I'll just preface it by saying that at FPOL, it was unfortunate that I moved the motion, the officer's recommendation, but didn't make it clear that there was an alternate, and I should have picked that one up. But so people, when they voted, had thought they were voting for the alternate, but they weren't. They were voting for the officer's recommendation. But it'd be good if we could get a comment just on the difference between the two and how we might manage it. Thank you.
Through the chair. So as it stands, everything we're doing, adopting prohibited areas, is technically allowed under the Cat Act. Other local governments have tried to put effective control rules into their legislation, but the Cat Act doesn't actually allow those rules to be put into a local law. Where it may fall down is with the Joint Standing Committee's own committee's terms of reference, and they have a point in there that says it cannot cause undue detriment to a person, which is why we now have the determination rule added to try and ameliorate that condition where cats can't be taken to the vets or they can't be, moved house, that kind of thing. We can't transport a cat. So that's why we've got the determination point in there now. And again, the City of Kwinana have just had their effective control clause. They've just been advised they need to remove that clause. The City of Bassendean, the same. So we're not actually asking for effective control provisions. We're asking to use the provision of the Cat Act that allows us to dictate which prohibited areas we want to make in the city.
I'm just going to go back. I had Councillor Graham turn off his microphone before so we could turn another one on. So I think he was possibly our next speaker, and then I'll come over this side.
Yep. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, yes, it all does sound very confusing. There's mentions of local laws and cat acts and all this sort of thing. But I think most of you know that I'll stick up for the moggy again. And to be serious, look, I think this, I can understand where Councillor Lang's coming from, and that's getting support and all this, but it's one of those, to me, it's one of those things that get support because it sounds like a good idea. To me, this is a very futile policy, or whatever it's going to be, local law or whatever you like to call it. It's confusing me to death, because it is something that, you know, in Fremantle, most people who have a cat have got a cat that's come from a rescue. I've had 4 cats over 40 years, all from rescue homes, and they've all lived on the streets for a year or so until they've found a loving home. And I've never had one of these cats present anything to our house more than a mouse and a rat. So if this is all to do with trying to save birds, I just really, I read the statistics where there's 3 million birds a year killed. Well, I wouldn't think there's mostly, you know, perhaps 20 a year, most probably in Fremantle, I don't know, but it's not broken down to anything that I can see that makes this such a thing that we have to throw time and effort and put officers' time at. You know, if you've got a moggy out in the street at midnight and someone's trying to catch it because it's on the street corner under a street light, well, that cat's only going to run down some driveway or back to its home. And, you know, the enforcement officer doesn't have any power to go into that driveway or into that home to try and catch the cat and interrogate it. So, you know, to me, it's just a futile exercise in something that's a feel-good for certain people or certain groups of people or whatever. I don't know. I just don't get it, and I just don't think the evidence stacks up in Fremantle that we need to go down this path. I mean, we've got water there, we've got surrounded by suburbs. I would support, though, the alternative recommendation or whatever it was in parks. I think that does have a lot of merit, but I certainly don't think there's any merit in trying to go down a policy where a cat can't cross a road at its own peril, of course, or walk down the footpath and have little kids give it a pat and a chat to, and bring a bit of joy to people. So I certainly won't be. I don't know whether these. I don't understand 1, 2, and 3, so I'll just vote down the whole amended officer recommendation. I think that's, from what I'm saying, that's the right thing to do. Someone could perhaps give me some direction on that. However, I would support the alternative officer recommendation, which seems a bit more balanced and only relates to council parks. I hope that has made some sense and everyone is clear on where I come from on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. I had Councillor Mofflin and Lorver speaking, and I don't know who was first, but we're going with Councillor Lorver. Thank you.
Thank you. You might have answered my question, Councillor Graham, but I just wanted to clarify. Thanks for sending through that email late today, Mayor. But the main difference between these two is basically verges and where cats would be banned from, or is it larger than that?
Through the chair, yes, it's a larger area than that. So we're going from 12 areas, which we currently have, to 96, I think there is, on that alternative recommendation, as opposed to every piece of land that the city owns or manages. Basically the parks and the green spaces, so not verges and footpaths, no.
I'll just go to the CEO.
Just to clarify, yeah, so the current resolution is all public places, yep. So roads, verges, all that sort of thing, absolutely, yep.
Did you want to speak further, Councillor Lorver? Councillor Mofflin.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I suppose I've just got a couple of additional questions then as well. So when I go back and reread the sort of intro to the alternative, it talks about the delegated legislation committee forming a view, and it doesn't contemplate local laws that ban cats from all public areas. That sounded a little different to the explanation that you gave in the first instance, that it was about effective control. So is the committee saying, has it said that it won't support banning of cats from all public areas? And then second question, when Councillor Lang refers to a fallback position, does that mean we would then, if the officer's recommendation, amended recommendation got up, that if that got rejected by the committee, do we need to go through an additional process again to then bring that law as it stands in the alternative recommendation now?
Through the chair, yes. First question. There's nothing in writing that says the committee won't allow doesn't anticipate, but there's just it's a governance forum, mouth to mouth, mouth to ear, saying that the Joint Standing Committee may not allow that. I think it was given as in a comment as an aside to a local government that was trying to adopt an effective control provision, and it was given as an aside. The committee does not anticipate local governments using the Cat Act to prohibit cats from all of their property. It didn't say it couldn't be done, it just said it didn't anticipate that happening. That was under their terms of reference, but the actual provisions in the Cat Act don't prohibit us from doing that.
Right, okay. Yep.
Second question?
And the second question was, Councillor Lang referred to, if this doesn't get up, if it goes to the committee and doesn't get up, that the fallback position is to then take the alternative and run that through. Is there then an additional process? Do we have to then go through advertising and the like and do the entire process to put that in place?
Yeah, so the process will be the same as it is now. So we'll have to effectively restart the process. We'll adopt the local law, it'll be gazetted, we'll advertise the adoption of it, we'll send it to the Joint Standing Committee. If they then send us make us or request we make an undertaking to repeal sections or to disallow the local law, then we would have to start the process again in order to change it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just follow on from Councillor Mofflin's question and confirm that the quote in italics on page 26 is from the Joint Standing Committee or the Department of Local Government? Which I think is what Councillor Mofflin was referring to.
Through the chair, that's from the Department of Local Government.
Okay, great, thanks. Councillor Sullivan, then Councillor Busick.
Thank you, and that was in fact the exact clause that jumped out of the report when I first read it, because it basically is saying the Act does envisage, in black and white, in very clear legalistic terms, the capacity to prohibit cats absolutely from specified areas. Now, the law is the law. And if it wanted to say only from parks or only from streets or only from areas, then it should have said that. I mean, local government has very little opportunity to deal with some matters that are particularly relevant in your local environment, and this is one of them. And I don't warm all that well to an unelected delegated legislation committee deciding it has the opportunity to interpret what the lawmakers, the elected people, were thinking of when they passed that legislation. I would prefer for the state to take the issue on board and decide as the lawmakers whether in fact we're going to go down the path of having genuine progress in dealing with the cat issue. Because as Councillor Lang has said, that is what large sections of communities have been calling for, and increasingly so for some time. Now, it might not be the highest priority for legislation reformists in government. There may be other things, but at least don't fob it off and say, well, we don't think that's what was meant when the lawmakers passed that law. Well, I'm sorry, that's not acceptable to me as a lawmaker, as an elected lawmaker at a local level. I don't want to get told that we'll just interpret the legislation and that's what we'll tell you, so you won't be able to do this. Well, it seems to me the law does allow us to do that. Having said that, I think the law, the CAT Act, probably does need to be changed, because the very thing that's been discussed today is the fact that it doesn't envisage controlling, like the Dog Act does, this would be my understanding. The Dog Act and many other acts envisage, if you're going to have an animal, you need to control it. And you need to control it by X, Y, and Z. So if the CAT Act, for some reason, doesn't do that, then the next best step would be to basically have an outright ban in all public areas, and then put in place some determination guidelines that basically said, however, in these circumstances, the law or the legislation that we might enact at the local level can be waived, and that might include putting Moggy on a leash. So, for me, there is a way around this, interpretation that you can't put in place. I guess ways of controlling a cat so that people can still have a cat and take it out the front and do all those things. But just to come back in an issue that is clearly publicly being debated and sort of say will go away for another 10 years is unacceptable. The other thing I would say about this is, if we, we've already been through this once. If we end up accepting the sort of mediocre version where it's just parks, the cat doesn't know the difference between the park and the street. The bird sure as hell doesn't know the difference between the park and the street. The lizard doesn't either. So it just feels it might tick a particular box that an unelected delegated legislation committee might like us to stick to, but it doesn't resolve the issue. And we'll be back here in 2 years' time having this exact same debate, saying, why can't we do better? So the messaging that comes from this chamber should be, look, the issue's not going to go away. Either the Act needs to be changed or local governments need to be able to do this sort of thing, and you're just going to need to accept that, or change the Act so that we can have, more far-reaching and perhaps more appropriate powers of dealing with the problem. So I support us basically, effectively saying, no, we want to keep going with this.
Councillor Busick, you're next. Thanks, Councillor Busick. Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I always enjoy Councillor Graham's spirited defence of moggies. And as a lapsed moggy owner, I understand the desire to believe that cats are awesome and couldn't possibly do any harm. So I've got a couple of stories I'd like to tell you about Felix, Councillor Graham. Felix was also a street-hardened young cat that came to us, and Felix lived till he was 20. my neighbours told me they didn't need to keep a cat because they had Felix. So he kind of occupied an entire block, and he was a champion ratter. And when he caught a rat, we would get it presented at regardless of the time of day or night, until he was rewarded for this rat he had produced. So it was really easy to believe that Felix didn't catch other critters because he didn't bring them to us. But cats are really smart. So Felix did bring birds into the house sometimes, and it was when he was angry with us. So if we went away and people minded our house, Felix brought the birds in. When we put a bird collar on Felix, he brought the birds in. So what I had to learn from that was just the incredible killing machine they are, but also the incredible survivors that they are, that they let us know the behaviour that's beneficial that we know, and they're very good at doing lots of other things that we have no idea what they're up to, because they are in and out all day and night and roaming around the neighbourhood. When I moved into my current house, Sans Felix, I've been working really hard to create a habitat. You know, I love the birds that live in and around Whitegum Valley. I bought there because of the verges and the vegetation, the proximity to Boo Park, but that whole biodiversity and the ability that we could create more in our suburbs. But the person across the road had a whole collection of cats. So it took a long time before I got the kind of bird life and wildlife in my yard that I've got now. And in fact, it only happened once the cats moved out of the neighbourhood. Putting a control on the parks in my neighbourhood wouldn't stop or discourage cats from coming into my yard, because it wouldn't send a message to their owners that it's not okay for the Felixes of this world to own the whole street and neighbourhood. So I really strongly support the extent that we're taking this legislation, because people like my poor old neighbours before and me now, who don't want a Felix in their backyard and would rather the 7 magpies that visit me every morning and 2 butcher birds and their babies that they bring me in August and September every year to meet. So yeah, anything that keeps my environment as rich in animal life and bird life as possible, I'm going to support. So I thank Councillor Lang for the work he has done to deliver this, and I hope we can pass it tonight for your birthday.
Very sweet. Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. I must admit, I was kind of feeling a bit like this afternoon, in that I would support, I did support this at committee, and I would also support the alternative. At least it improves the situation. But I did want to make a couple of points that, you know, I again in Whitegum Valley, there's a person who lives just down the road from me who's created this beautiful garden full of trees, full of birds. She gets birds frequently, dead birds, killed by the neighbour's cat, and the neighbour just won't even listen to her about trying to keep the cat contained in any way. So she finds it quite distressing. And the other thing is in Whitegum Valley and in some other parts of the city, there are some pretty amazing verges going in, and the birds are already starting to come back. You can see with the grevilleas, the honey eaters, there's all kinds of birds starting to really populate certainly that area where big verges have been able to be planted. So we really do have to think long term about what cats do, and it is well known in biological sciences just how much damage cats have done, particularly out in the wild. And they're a beautiful animal. They're just a lovely animal, but they really do need to be contained if people are going to keep them. So I sit here now listening, and I think I still support the recommendation, because we may not have a massive amount of hope to control it, but at least the message is there, and hopefully people will take more notice of what's going on. But should this fail, I will still very much support the second motion going through. So yes, well done for putting all this effort in, because it's a very important issue to manage in the cities. Thank you.
Councillors, any other comment? I'll speak otherwise. So just on the issue of nuisance cats, both versions, whether we go this way or the way drafted in the I'm going to get the word wrong, but the alternative officer recommendation, the listed parks one, both do include nuisance provisions. So nuisance cats who are causing a problem on other people's properties, we don't currently have those provisions. Both versions of this proposed local law do contain new nuisance provisions. So cats can be declared a nuisance, owners can be fined and asked to change their behaviour. So I just want to be clear that the nuisance part of this doesn't change across either way we go. I suspect because I have cats, people think that I'm, pro cats and cats should be wild and free. And to be honest, I mean, I have a car. I don't believe that they're the primary mode of transport that we should be encouraging through our city either. So I'm not making any decisions based on what does or doesn't live in my house. What I will make my decision on is, I guess, enforceability and resources. So there's a couple of concerns. I mean, one with the resources, I think it is fairly clear that the intent of the ban in public places, we will be doing this as a statement. I can see perfectly well why people in the room want to make that statement, and I support their reasons for it. I suspect we will get the note back that the other local governments have said that it says we think you're trying to ban cats in public places and we will not allow you to do that, which will then set us on a path of re-advertising, reconsulting, and going through this again for the list of prescribed areas, no doubt, which it's the world of perfect is the enemy of done or perfect is the enemy of good enough. And I think it's a good step forward to do something which might actually be approved, which is to ban cats from those parks. I think it does, all of this sends messages and reinforces opportunities to educate cat owners about bells and other things that can help stop them from interfering with wildlife. But, I also think it is a significant step forward to go from 13 prescribed areas where cats cannot be to 94. I think that is, in the hectare terms, I'm sure it's a fairly significant number of hectares that we're including now. So I won't be voting for this amendment if this fails and the alternative gets debated. I will be supporting that, not because I have cats or anything else, because I would like us to make a law that may actually stand up and remain. Councillor Lang, did you want to close?
Really good debate. I wish perhaps some of you could close for me. Some of it was extremely convincing. It's been an extremely long journey getting here. I was reading back through some of the notes that I've taken on this over the time, and we've had representatives from Friends of Samson Park, Friends of Booyambara Park, Cantonment Hill. We've had the local vet, Garnet Hall, come and speak here. Michael from Fremantle 2 has actually did a PhD on feral cats. He came in here and spoke in support of this as well. We've had the former chair of the EPA come and speak in favour of this also. We've had a huge cross-section. I've had cat owners coming in here and speaking in favour of what we're doing as well. And over this time, I've received emails from people, believe it or not, all around the world, in fact, on this, and generally all around Australia, yes. And we're now seeing the change happen locally. This week, I sent everyone an email here, City of Gosnells, trying to do this. The incredible work Charlie's been doing. Just don't think they've put the right technical pieces forward that relate to the Cat Act. City of Gosnells unanimously supported it. The person that put it forward, their Facebook page blew up, all positive comments. Bayswater, Vincent, Bassendean, Coburn, Kwinana, Rockingham, everyone's following in these steps that we're taking. So absolutely believe that we're on the right path here. And when you look back also in the 70s, people, I wasn't alive then, but dogs, I hear stories of people's dogs used to roam the streets as well. And then the dog Act came in and you had to put your dog in your yard, and I'm sure there was outrage about that as well. Similarly, I people will look back in the future and ask us, you used to let cats roam around and eat all your wildlife? And we'll be like, yeah, we did. But this is where it changes. We've got an opportunity here to do something really responsible for cat health and also for wildlife. And it's up to us. I think what Charlie has put together is incredible, and the amount of research. I worked with Charlie this week, and Charlie's got this ginormous folder with all information from all the local councils have done, notes on the Cat Act, and we've taken the community feedback on board that perhaps banning entirely isn't what we should be doing. And this is where point 3 comes in here, the amendment, and it's a genius little amendment that Charlie's added in. We are allowed to give people permission to bring an animal onto our property. So your animal's prohibited, but we might allow you to bring it through this amendment here. The stats on the amount of animals that are killed, it's in the billions. That's documented by the CSIRO. And just the final piece I wanted to add, which is in response, that verges that we want to ban from, as in Waikam Valley, are an absolute refuge for wildlife. And we know now through our trapping that, yeah, we've banned cats from certain parks. Cats are still being caught there. And what we're finding is that the cat owners, instead of taking the fine, unfortunately, relinquishing their cat to the cat haven. So the cats don't know where the boundary of Samson Park is. They don't know where the boundary of Booyambara Park is. We need a buffer. We need to keep cats in their home, but we also need to be compassionate. And we do know people that walk their cats on leads. And in fact, I saw a lady at South Beach of the week with 2 cats in a pram. So we need to allow people to take their cats outside. It's been a long journey. We've come this far. This motion started in October. I trust the work Charlie's done, and I think we put it forward to the state government, and if they knock it back, we've got a fallback, but we've come this far. Let's submit it, this option here we've got on the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. So I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? And against? I'll be your friend, Jeff. All right. Yeah, you did. All right. Okay, so there's no need for us to go to the foreshadowed alternative. So we'll move on to Westgate Mall upgrade of awnings. There's an amended officer's recommendation that I can't find in my documents anywhere. So I'm assuming we're going to pop that up on the screen, or is that a... Could we make it bigger? Sorry. Oh, this is the... Yes. Okay. I'll go to Mr. Tattersall to tell us about this one.
Thank you. Through the chair, it's just a clarification in respect to point 2. The wording was bad and perhaps a little bit misleading, so we've adjusted it to reflect the actual budget adjustment, which is 160,000. That's all it is.
All right. So I will move this amended officer recommendation. We have a seconder for that. Councillor Archibald. Any debate? No, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay. We may as well continue through FPOL as listed. But if you do want to look ahead to ARMC and the C reports, I will ask if we can move some of those on block. So just maybe circle anything that you're looking at that you think you would like to speak on. And I'll ask you after the next couple of items. So FPOL 22069, budget amendments. So I'll move the officer's recommendation and get a seconder for that one. Councillor Archibald, any discussion? Questions? Nope. I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The proposed licence agreement for the South Fremantle Football Club, noting impartiality interests and everyone remaining and voting. I'll move the officer's recommendation. Have a seconder for that. Councillor Moughlin. Perhaps we might go straight to your amendment, Councillor Moughlin.
So yeah, I'll move the proposed amendment. If someone will second it, and then I'll chat to it.
Yep, Councillor Jones looks like he's seconding it. Go for it.
Thank you, and I suppose and apologies, the purpose and reasons aren't included on the documents there, but the reason that I added this to the work that Councillor Pemberton did in adding the elements that came from the grants and sponsorship policy was to essentially provide two opportunities for the city. One was that we could go and lock in an agreement with the South Fremantle Football Club about what type of recognition that we do receive. So even noting that we put in there the principles that do come from the sponsorship policy, we don't necessarily say that we will go and sign up to an agreement with the footy club. And this essentially provides us with that opportunity to do so and get a commitment from them about what that recognition will look like. And that's only there for a period of not exceeding 3 years to acknowledge that, hey, we do have this agreement which is likely to be running for an extended period of time. So really it is, one, to provide us some certainty about how we can capture those benefits for the city, and secondly to enable us to review that at a reasonable period of time if we do need to do so. So I spoke to Councillor Pemberton over the last couple of days in regards to adding that, and I can't speak for her, but spoke to her about the proposal, and she was okay with the addition to the benefits, if you like.
Thanks, Councillor Moughlin. Did anyone else want to speak on that amendment? Councillor Busick.
At the FPOL committee, I came to the conclusion that overall, as a package, that the city would benefit from this this agreement. Since that time, I've had a number of other sporting clubs who have had a conversation with me, and they brought up a really good point, which I think we need to. I'd like to table it in the chamber, and that is, how will this agreement affect the community sporting clubs? Is there going to be any effect? And is this going to affect the Ken Allen playing fields? And I think that they make a good point. I've had some issue. I'm not entirely happy with it, but I'm not a big sporting fan, so I rely on other people's feedback for me. What I like about this particular agreement, if it brings in 3 or 4, half dozen games a year, and there's 10,000 people coming in the city, the trickle-down effect is awesome, and that would be worthwhile investing in that type of agreement. Is there any way that we can incorporate some safeguards for the community sporting clubs?
I might throw that question to the CEO, maybe. Yep. And perhaps also anything around Ken Allen or other sporting fields. Thanks.
Through the chair, this licence agreement really just solidifies South Fremantle Football Club's presence at Fremantle Oval for the tenure of 40 years. It is the basis of a conversation we had with the South Fremantle Football Club once the Fremantle Football Club departed the premise in 2017. It doesn't relate in any way, shape or form to Hilton Reserve and won't affect that. There might be a presumption there that somehow this includes Perth Glory, but it doesn't. It only includes South Fremantle Football Club. There is some provision to maintain this particular oval under these conditions. Obviously, the main goal moving forward is that we try and get redevelopment at the oval in the future and allow South Fremantle Football Club to be self-sustaining through that process. How long that might really take, we don't know, to be fair. Hopefully within the 10-year cycle moving forward. But this doesn't change anything that we're currently providing the club today.
Okay. Did that answer?
Yes, it does. I'm just going to go one step further. And is there any way we can do an exclusion clause As I said, there's a number of people in our community sporting clubs who are watching. They don't have the same confidence. And I think if we can give some of those people some confidence by putting in an amendment with some exclusions or make your intent a lot more clearer, it just might go the distance required.
Councillor Vusic, perhaps what we'll do, we're still on Councillor Moughlin's amendment at the moment, so we might continue the debate on that amendment. If you want to draft something as a proposed amendment, and then we can consider if it is a minor amendment after we've dealt with Councillor Moughlin's amendment. Does that work? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Just on the amendment, I want to support and thank Councillor Moughlin for bringing it forward. I mean, it's been very clear to me as a person that has been to a lot of the functions and games at South Freo, that while the city is often acknowledged and, you know, pats on the back and those sort of things, there isn't really a very strong official approach to recognition of the city. And of course, we all want to go forward together. You know, I want the club to get back to its heyday. The club wants to get back to its heyday. We're trying to help that happen, and they should do more than just have the president slap us on the back in a room of 500 people and actually acknowledge that. And that's why both Councillor Pemberton's original proposal and Councillor Moughlin's amendment are important. What Councillor Moughlin's amendment does, I think, is encourage a more flexible approach, or at least provide for a more flexible approach. And I think that would be a better way moving forward with the club than sort of necessarily the sort of the harder stick approach where you include it in the you know, in the main contract document and the like. So certainly support the amendment.
Yeah, I support the amendment as well. If anyone else wants to speak, put your light on now. But I think the other one of the issues that was raised is what are they doing in the community? And I think what this allows us to do is in the negotiation every few years of that agreement to ensure that there are trickle-through benefits, if you like, not just for the business community who benefits when the spectators come to town, but also for local clubs, junior clubs who can benefit from having as great a waffle team as South Fremantle are in our community. Anyone else? All right. Councillor Moughton, do you wish to close or should I put it to a vote? All right. All those in favour of that amendment? That's unanimous. Back to the item now as amended. Councillor Vusic, did you have some words that you wanted us to consider as a potential minor amendment? I may need to get some advice on whether we can.
I think I'd like to get some advice. I actually don't have the words to put that in. I mean, I guess the other part of that question is there an appetite for it in this chamber?
Can you perhaps just articulate for me again what what you'd be seeking to achieve?
I guess just an exclusion statement where we make it very clear that this particular agreement is not going to be detrimental to the local community sporting clubs.
Okay. I might just ask if there is anything in the current drafting of the agreement that has an effect to that end, you know, that deep dive into a legal document that we're probably asking for here. I might let you guys have a look at that. And Councillor Archibald, did you want to talk to that?
I just actually wanted to ask a question because I just want to clarify: is the issue more to do with making sure other clubs don't feel like they're going to become disadvantaged because this club has got a pretty interesting deal? Because you know, I share the point, but I do believe that what's before us is fair and reasonable from this point of view here before us tonight. But I do agree with you that there will be other clubs that will have for some time been trying to improve their lot one way or another. And it would be good if we can start having some of those conversations with them. So I don't know that. I think this one to me would stand alone, but I do believe that it would be good for us, and we are starting to have those conversations now about the future of the leases of the other grounds and that sort of thing. So I think that conversation should be picked up, but not necessarily in this particular environment. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Councillor Mofflin.
Yeah, I suppose I'd add to that as well. I think we had these conversations at the beginning of the year around completing leases and licenses for sporting clubs, and even though it's taking us a little bit of time to get there, I believe there is a commitment from both the elected member body and staff to ensure that we get those in place and recognise that they are vitally important for those clubs to be able to get that infrastructure they need, be able to apply for grants and the like. And I'd like to think that, maybe South Fremantle Football Club is the best known of the sporting clubs in Fremantle. We can get this one off and we can look to work towards the redevelopment of Fremantle Oval, and we can also work with our community sporting clubs to get that completed. And I think we've got a meeting that's likely to come up in the near future with the sporting clubs to sit down and have that conversation and work towards it. So I would be, hopefully clubs don't feel that they've got their, that they're at risk of disadvantage. And I think the work that many people around this table are doing in terms of engaging with local clubs and making that commitment to them should make them feel comfortable. And I look forward to the work that's going to come to close out those leases and licenses.
Perhaps also, Councillor Groom.
So I'll probably put a slightly different perspective, maybe getting a little bit to where Councillor Busick is, and I've got to the position that I can't support this proposal. So I think I flagged in an earlier discussion that I find it quite unfair. We have so many clubs that we're unable to support that are struggling, yet we're supporting our biggest club with kind of a better deal than all but one other local governments in the whole Perth metropolitan area, with an almost indefinite agreement, which, whilst our aspiration is that they move towards being more kind of independent and self-sufficient, that's not the basis of the agreement. And I understand we've inherited it, I understand the history, etc., but I can't support it. And I also read it and look at it, and it's in the public realm, and every other club will be quite within their rights now to turn up and say we're not paying rates and we're not paying licence fees and we're not paying this and we're not paying that. And we genuinely can turn around in any reasonableness and have a different conversation with them. So that's okay, but that is the precedent we're setting with this agreement. As much as I love having the football club there, and I think we should be supporting some of them, I just can't reconcile this order of support when I know the situation so many of our other clubs are in. So yeah, that's where I've got to on this one.
Thanks, Councillor Groom. On the question Councillor Busick was raising before, I suppose perhaps we could clarify in the agreement, is it specified just the Fremantle Oval location? Because I think part of the concern there was potential, desires for them to spread beyond that physical location. The other element that I think might be relevant would be the community availability for other events and how those are managed, and whether if a bunch of sporting clubs wanted to have a festival of junior football, would the oval be accessible to them? So could I get some officer comment on that?
Thank you, through the chair. The agreement being proposed this evening is a licence agreement. So one of the conversations that council had when Fremantle Football Club handed back their lease was that we no longer wanted to allow someone to have exclusivity over the site, and we wanted some control back. So the licence agreement gives them use of the club facilities, but not the oval, and talks about how we'll come to an agreement each year on when they can and can't use the oval. But does give reference to the fact that a waffle season exists, and we, will make way for the waffle season. The intended purpose of having a license and not a lease is that we can use the facility outside of that use. So this does absolutely solidify that conversation we had back in 2016, 2017. And so therefore that does allow us to consider other community uses and give also a community aspect to the facility, albeit that clearly the green oval space itself can only handle so much activity on it before it starts to perform at a lower level than a waffle football club oval needs to be maintained. This licence agreement only relates to Fremantle Oval. No other oval reserve in the city of Fremantle is included in this conversation, in this agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Lorber.
Thank you. While normally I may have reservations about the largest footy club or the largest sporting club getting the best deal versus the local community clubs. I think approving this would actually help set a new potential standard going forward for all the other local clubs, where we could look at how we could support all the smaller clubs in a better and smarter way. So I do support the amendment. I support the thing before us because I think it might be a good way for us to raise the bar on all these other clubs that are around Fremantle, and I hope that's the conversations that we're having in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Lorber. Councillor Kamada, sorry, was first, and then Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. Yeah, just briefly, I concur with Councillor Lorber's thoughts and also Councillor Moughlin in the views that he put forward. I do think that South Fremantle holds a unique position in the heart of Fremantle. They're an iconic club, and I think the onus is on us to ensure that the smaller clubs are looked after fairly, and so yeah, I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald.
Thank you. Yes, I will also support this, but I just do want to say that it'd be really good if South Fremantle Football Club did make themselves a little bit more visible in the city in terms of community, and they're getting this deal, number one, to acknowledge the city for the support that they're going to get, particularly in comparison to the other clubs, but also to make themselves a bit more visible in the city. I mean, they have been here for more than 100 years, but right now, if a visitor came here, you wouldn't really know it. And football did used to be I'm not a football supporter, but it did used to be a really big thing at one point. So it'd be great if they could come on board a bit with that and start having a bit. We all talk about having purple in our town, but let's have a bit more of the other colours as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Archibald, and certainly if this is approved tonight, that's the conversation we'll be having tomorrow morning with the club. All right, so I think we're ready to go to a vote. So all those in favour? And against? Councillors Vusic and Groom against. So that's passed. Thank you. All right, so that brings us to the end of the FPOL items. The first audit and risk item we'll obviously debate, but 2, 3, 4 and 5. Does anyone wish to speak on items, ARMC items 2, 3, 4 or 5? Just give you a minute to have a look. Going. All right. So I'm going to move items, ARMC items 2, 3, 4 and 5 on block. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Sullivan. All those in favour? Great. That will bring us back to the remaining ARMC item, which is the Walyalup Civic Centre update. And so I'll move the officer's recommendation and have a seconder for that. Councillor Groom. And I notice there's a proposed amendment by Councillor Kamada. Were there any questions or comments on the report before we go to that? Nope. Councillor Kamada, you wanted to move your amendment.
Yes, thank you. Try and do this the right So I'd ask for a seconder first. Yeah, I'll move it and if we could have a seconder, please.
Sure. Gosh, so many seconders. Councillor Jones looked like he had his hand up all that time.
It's my big moment.
Yeah.
Look, this is something I've thought hard about. The construction of the Walyup Civic Centre is the most significant development in our recent history. There's no question it's a magnificent building, magnificent structure, having recently taken out the highest honour in this year's Australian Institute of Architects WA Award. But we all know that its construction has not been without its challenges and, fair to say, controversy. And there's been a bit of confusion in recent times about the status of the building and its, where it's at. It's with this in mind and in light of the most recent Audit and Risk Management Committee meeting that I'm proposing this amendment to the officer's recommendation on this item and asking for a report that outlines a comprehensive update of the project in its totality. I believe that it's vital to understand where we stand now that the project is all but complete to enable us to make future decisions that will lead us to a time when we can appreciate its true value and ongoing benefits, along with the many exciting opportunities that we have beyond us. I'd like to thank the officers for their cooperation in putting something together and Councillor Vucic for her input. Now, I hope that my colleagues on council can support this amendment and we can really look forward to exciting times ahead. Yeah, so that's pretty much the crux of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, the seconder, did you want to speak or would anyone else like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Vucic.
Gosh, what would this chamber be if I didn't speak on this particular item? This is an update. In April, I put together a narrative. I thought there was substantial evidence that I got from the King Square business plan, all 57 pages of them. It's appropriate to say where do we agree in that couple of months that have passed. Sorry. We do agree that we started off with $45 million as the business plan states. The response that I got from our CEO also supports our sale of assets, and we're only about $250,000 difference. So we can round it off and say 45 million. What was interesting upon another reading of the King Square Business Plan 2012, I'm not sure, is this mic bouncing off or is it okay? It's okay? Okay, and it says this about the project. The project is deemed a commercial enterprise which falls under the requirements of Section 3.59 of the Local Government Act. Under the Act, the following key 6 steps are required. The first step is the intent to undertake the project. The city did a good job. They endorsed the release of this business plan. They put a lot of time and effort into it. So that was a big tick. The second step was a statewide public notice, public availability of the business plan. Another big tick for the city. It had the business plan available on the city's website and at the council's customer centre. The third step was a capacity for public submission to council regarding the project. Another big tick. 6 weeks, a 6-week period of public consultation on the business plan, and there was an ability to respond to council in writing. Step number 4, the council's consideration of public feedback. Another big tick. Formal council meetings, there were processes to consider responses, and the council also made a decision requiring an absolute majority. The 5th step required, if approved by council with no significant changes, that there was ability for council to proceed with the project and entering into project agreements. Another big tick for the council, because we did enter into project agreements and we also embarked on council policy and procedures. My narrative goes then to the years 2012 to 2018. During that time period, and it doesn't really matter when, there was a recognition that the total cost of the project was going to be much more than 45 million. The sixth step in this legislative requirement states, should material changes be required, and one would think that exceeding the cost of the total project by some millions would be considered material changes. The remedy is to repeat the business plan process. I can understand why this particular step could have been overlooked, because it takes a lot of time and money to engage in a proposal like the council did at the time. Did the council amend the King Square business plan? There is no evidence of it. Did the council repeat the business plan process so that the ratepayers and residents were informed that the material change to the cost of the project had changed? No evidence that the council engaged in transparent communication. How did the council fund the material change in the increased cost of the project between the years of 2012 and 18? I've seen no evidence to alter my narrative that says there was a sale of 3 income-performing car parks, Adelaide, Josephson Street and Point Streets, for an estimated 7.85 million. And there is evidence through financial information and reporting that these assets were sold. Did the council receive 7.85 million? I don't know. No one's refuted it. We know that there is agreement that the council borrowed 15 million from the government. We both have acknowledged that. However, there is financial evidence that the council borrowed another 5, which brings it up to 20. The OAG draft annual financial statements for the 30th of June 21 presented as part of that report committed and contracted project works for the city of another 11.8 million. That's this financial year, of which 9.3 million related directly to the Civic Centre. Total project costs, which is what the King Square Business Plan of 2012 refers to, means Civic Centre building, public realm, architect fees, project management fees, demolition, all the nuts, bolts, screws, the whole shebang. So in summary, we agree on 45. We don't agree so much on the 7.85, but it's there. It's a plausible explanation. We agree on the 5. It was increased. And by the auditor's own statements, 9.3 million of the 11.8 is directly a civic centre cost. So that gives you 67.15. There is beauty in the simplicity of numbers which tell a story. The CEO's response to my questions after the April OCM has provided the following information. We agree on the rounded figure of 45 million, but he also states how he got to the 45 million. He said that the new library is 15.6 million, the public realm is 4.2 million, the civic centre is 24.95 million. Now, just from this narrative, I know that there's something not quite adding up. Even if you add the new library and the civic centre and call it the construction budget, 40.5 million is the spend. Compare this figure to the one presented in the agenda on page 53, which states 46.8 million. There is already an overspend of 6 million. The CEO continues with his response on cost analysis. It continues with a cost analysis, which is really a strange way of presenting another set of numbers. And these numbers are the 30th of June, which is this year. That the total being of the project cost would be 53.6, And the last paragraph states, this would see the estimated figure of total project costs at 57.21. The explanation of the two figures can be best described as a word soup. I just don't understand it. At the May Council meeting, work in progress, an item that tracks capital works in the city as of last year, 30th of June 21, was reported as 23.66. On the 9th of March at the FPOL committee, we were presented with a draft annual financial report from the OAG, and they corrected that figure from 23.66 to 52.153472. I asked whether the next monthly financials, which is the 31st of May, would be corrected as audited, and the response was that it was affirmative. Now, I've had a short conversation with Kylie just before the meeting started, and there is a commitment to change that for the next financials. That there was just an issue of staffing to be able to do that for this month. What I'd like you to remember with that 52.15 OAG adjusted figure, and Councillor Groom actually had a really good question a couple of months ago, basically asking, well, surely there must be other capital projects in the city, and so therefore it's not all attributed to the civic centre. Very good question, because when you did the additional information that came through, which itemised where the spend was and how much, out of the 52.15 million, 51.306 was attributed to the civic centre directly. You've got to add the 9.3 in the last 12 months, and you're still up over 61 million. I'm nearly there. I have asked why and when will the final sign-off of the annual financial statements by OAG come about. The answers were not flash. It's basically, well, we're still giving information to the OAG and we're going to get there. If you actually go on the website and you post the same question to the OAG, they give you a different answer. And I can share with you, I'm not going to go into the confidentiality aspect of audits, but the second paragraph says the OAG is due to issue the audit report in July. This delay is the result of a number of factors which we will discuss with the city to assist with the delivery of future audits in a timelier manner. That suggests to me that the additional information comes from the city in terms of being able to finalise the annual financials. It is worrying because we're going to be moving off into another new financial year without dealing with the previous one. I welcome Councillor Kamada's motion. Initially, the motion asked for the report to be tabled for July FPOL, and now it is in August. I know there's pressures on the city, but what is more pressing than this particular question? I think if we had a better handle on our finances, 3 weeks would have been more sufficient. In conclusion, I would just like to say the report that we can expect from Councillor Kamada's motion is important. It is really important because it would be good to be able to get it before the budget, because the budget comes to the council and we need to approve a budget that has recognised an overspend, a very, very substantial overspend. That means if we don't address it, we will be having a budget. It will look really good with figures. We'll have all the best intentions in the world as elected members. However, we'll be robbing Peter to pay Paul throughout 22-23. And this is one of the reasons why I have a problem with budget amendments. I've actually passed them, but I really have a problem simply because we've got so many buckets where we dip into. So the decisions that we might have agreed on at the beginning of a financial year doesn't resemble anything what was intended towards the end of the financial year. The purpose of what I have done over the last 18 months with scrutinising the financials, it's not a witch hunt. It's just that we can do better. If we don't address the big issues in our city, how can we move forward? How can we use that energy and that commitment to be more transparent to our ratepayers? How can that be wrong? You know, I've got a question to Mayor Fitzharding. When are you going to get involved in sorting this financial situation out so that I don't have to come in month after month after month? When are we going to be able to be truthful with ourselves? I don't mind the building. I would like to spend the rest of my 18 months ripping this Band-Aid off and then rolling up my sleeves and saying, how do we move forward in a really positive way that our finances are going to reflect our true basic service delivery, and then have a look at how can we attain more income producing assets. It's not about nailing anybody in this council, but it is an elephant that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawver.
Oh yeah, thank you. I want to thank Councillor Vucic for her comments and for her attention to detail on this, what is by all accounts, a historic project for the city of Fremantle to build this building we're in today. But I also want to thank the councillors who were here when it was first conceptualized and have seen it through these past 10 years or longer. I don't even know. It's been a long time. To have the patience and the fortitude to, through many iterations of this council, deliver a project such as this is pretty amazing. And you know, it's coming from someone who hasn't actually demonstrated that kind of patience in my short time on council in all the ways that I would have liked to, but it's a really amazing job that you've done. I think Councillor Fideli's amendment really does, for someone who's new to this, kind of just draw that line. It really will, for me as a person, say this is what it was, this is what it is, and we can then move on, as Councillor Vucic is suggesting. So I want to thank Councillor Kamada for putting this forward, and I'll be enthusiastically supporting it.
Thanks, Councillor Lawver. Other councillors? Councillor Mofflin, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose I've just got a couple of comments on the amendment, and I thank Councillor Kamada for bringing it because, yeah, it'd be great to draw a line under this and move on, and just to make sure that you know, that we are being clear about what is being asked for as part of that report, and particularly on B. And I'm sure Councillor Kamada can't respond to me now, but as part of closing, but how the question there in regards to how the city has funded the total project cost of the Walyalup Civic Centre, what does that actually mean? What's the question about, you know, how have we funded it? Is the question about the loans that have been, or the loan that has been taken by the city to contribute to the funding of the Civic Centre, or is it another particular question? And also then on questions on point C as well. Not sure of whether the wording's exactly right about the income earning commitment presented in the King Square business plan. Being a business plan, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that it's a commitment, but a projection or a view to what might be potential income that comes from that. So just put those couple of points there, and particularly just on that amendment. And maybe when we move out of talking about the amendment, a question to staff in regards to a comment that Councillor Vucic made about how this particularly influences the budget for 22-23. Not clear to me that there is a direct relationship between the two. So it would be good to understand that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mofflin. So we'll stay on the amendment and then we'll go to that question after the amendment. Councillor Archibald, you wanted to speak?
Yes, thank you. I'm quite happy to support this amendment because like all the others here in this room, I think it's time that we had one whole snapshot of what it was, and there it is, sort of thing. And I, like Councillor Lorver, totally admire the courage that the people had way back in 2012, I think, when it started. It's a bold vision to get to this point. But I just had actually started doing my own little bit of poking around in the records, and I just wanted, I stopped for a bit because I ran out of time, but I just wanted to make a couple of comments because in June 2017, the Ordinary Council meeting had a financial implication here on the project. The overall project estimate of the new civic building, including fees and costs, this is the building, is 50 million. Now that's pre-COVID, pre all the other things, people going belly up and we have to find another builder and all the rest of it. That was the estimate for the building. We've come in on the number, I haven't got the numbers updated from what we've got at the moment, but it's somewhere in the order of 53.5 according to the reports. But just I mean, in 2017, that figure was made. Also in the King Square report in 2017, it says the overall project budget for improvements to the public realm in King Square, this is not the building, this is the public realm, is estimated to be in the order of 8 million. And part of this, approximately 2 million, that bit's not relevant, sorry. But anyway, so that was estimated to be 8 million. We haven't done all the works that were envisaged for the public realm, but we've done a good chunk of them. So they were the figures that were projected in 2017. And I just defy almost any organisation to go through a period of what we have over that 5 years to come out as well as we have, you know. So I'm very happy for this work to be done. I'm very happy for it to be put into the public domain, and I'm very happy for us to all understand very clearly what the costs were, how we got there, and how we managed it. But it still was a pretty good reckoning by all accounts, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Archibald. If there are no further speakers, I will support the amendment. I'll support it not because I think there is a problem, and the Deputy Mayor and I have been forensically through the information with the officers as you would when it's presented to understand, you know, whether there is any smoking gun. What I do think we have is a communication problem. There are a number of things getting somewhat overlaid. There is the cost of the building. There is the cost of what was in the business case, which went beyond the building as part of that agreement. And there is all the other things that we've done and approved under separate council decisions that have contributed to this broader precinct. So obviously those 3 columns are going to have different numbers in them because they're talking about different things. Have we neatly and tidily reported that over the period of time? Possibly not. And I think what the opportunity for us now is to come up with those final numbers that says, back then we made this decision, we thought it was going to cost this much, and this is how much it's cost, and do that kind of final reckoning on those, you know, different categories so that everyone's very clear and we can draw a line underneath it, and every decision we make from here on in is independent and separate from, you know, previous decisions. So, Councillor Kamada, back to you to close.
Thank you, Mayor Fitzharding, and I think you've summed that up beautifully. I think, you know, I accept that this table that we have in the first part of the recommendation is, you know, relevant to this point in time, but we have the opportunity now to fill in the gaps. And, you know, whatever the outcome is, you know, we'll be able to accept and move on from that point. And we know it's this project, when it's a bold project that was taken on so long ago, and the obstacles and challenges along the way obviously going to have an impact on the final outcome. So we all understand that. But it's just important now that as you said, that we draw the line, we find out exactly where we're at. In response to Councillor Moughlin's on B, I'm just talking about a breakup of the funding, whether it be loans, any grants that were given or ratepayer, just to break up along those lines. And I'm sure all the information's there and it'll be brought together. And with C, I'm happy to change the wording, of commitment if you think that's appropriate. But I think you get the general idea of what we're looking for. Okay, thank you.
Our office is clear. Just before we go to a vote, what the income owning commitment? Do we know what question we're answering? Comfortable? Okay. All right. So I'll put that to the vote. This is Councillor Kamada's amendment. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you. Back to the item as now amended. And we had a question for the CEO or Mr. Hammond as to how this might relate to the budget for 2022-23. Councillor Moughlin's question.
Through the chair, and the CEO might want to add to this from a technical perspective, but as far as next year's budget goes, it would be down to whether there is any budgeted works from this year that are required to be carried forward into next year's budget that have not been completed this year.
Good stuff. So on the item as amended, any further questions or discussion? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, and I thank Councillor Kamada for the amendment that you brought forward and for the work Councillor Busick did in getting that up. It is clear that we need a narrative that clarifies what occurred at which stage moving forward, and that had been discussed. Certainly, I know I've been involved in discussions with the CEO and others to emphasise that we absolutely need that, because it's a 10-year process. This isn't something that happened overnight, and there were many steps along the way, each of which was reported at the time. And if anybody can remember every single version of each step and articulate them, then they're doing a lot better than I can. But the things that really jump out in my mind was it was a brave decision. It was a necessary decision. There are lots of things that people might not agree with about whether we should have kept the old building or done a brand new building or built a very high quality civic building that has now won multiple awards. So there are always going to be lots of questions, but those decisions were made. And that's the point of a council, is it makes the decisions based on the information on the day. And do I feel like the information that was provided to me each time I made a decision was somehow inadequate or even misleading? No, I don't. And so when I go back and look at things like the business plan and I read what the document describes as the city's core facilities, and then I read what it says it's going to cost, and the description of the city's core facilities is basically the buildings and the public realm bit that existed between the two buildings, which became known as the urban room, which is our piece of lawn out here. Not all of the other urban realm areas of the project. And so the business plan, and remember, the business plan is only required where a development is considered a commercial enterprise, if that's the right words. All of the stuff that we do around the building is not a commercial enterprise. It's not dealing with a very large amount of commercial space. It's just normal business. And there were other mechanisms for dealing with that and making those decisions that didn't have to be signed off through the very technical, legal process of a business plan. which is different to a business case. So the document, the business plan, talks about the indicative construction cost of the city's core facilities as determined by Ralph Beatty Bosworth. So that's what it was describing in that section. The total project cost, and perhaps unfortunate words, because in the business case and certainly in every other reporting, you know, the improvements to the public realm beyond the building itself and a whole range of other things were always part of conversations. But in this particular document, where it talks about the total project cost, it's estimated to be that sort of round figures, $45 million. And it emphasised October 2012 figures. Well, the fact that we got even close to that 8 years on, 9 years on, 10 years on is an absolute miracle. And would it have changed the decision making at the time if we'd known that the final figure 10 years later would be 46 million or 47 million or the like? The decisions were made with the best of intent, with the right information in front of us, and as an inflationary environment that we had to work through and a very difficult time to build. I think they're pretty, you know, we've stood the testament of time. There are things which are on the list which I think are really relevant, and I kind of don't understand why the public conversation isn't more directed to that. But that they relate to the things like, well, okay, you predicted business earnings of this from commercial property back then. How are we faring with that? Well, I think if anybody in any commercial environment predicted the commerciality of a project 10 years ago thinks that they're the same today, then I'd be very, very surprised. But you make the decisions based on the information that's in front of you. When we started this project, City of Perth rental rates were $950 a square metre. The estimate of what you might be able to get in a suburban location for similar sorts of offices was in the order of $500 to $550 a square metre. Well, no one is going to be getting that at the moment. And is that the council's fault at the time? No. It made its decisions based on that, as basically the private sector does as well. But I think it is worth explaining to the community that, like with any other development, things haven't gone exactly to plan. Does that make it the wrong development to do at the time? I don't think so. Is it quite possible that those things will turn around? Well, history shows without an absolute question in my mind that of course those sort of things turn around. That's the market goes up, the market goes down. The community understand that. The councils understand that. It's called, you know, for the private sector, it's called speculative development for a reason. We had to be more careful, and I believe we were more careful with our business planning and the like. But at the end of the day, and I hope this is reported in the document as well, it's not just what you see and looking at the decisions that you made. It's also what might have been had you not made those decisions. And I think that's as equally an important part of the conversation, because if the consequences of not having made those decisions was a dysfunctional public centre square, commercial buildings that we owned that were simply untenable, buildings that were past their use-by date and not economically viable to maintain into the future. So had we done nothing, then of course that's what we would still have. And so, you know, the development behind us may not be here. The development funds that brought to the city, which you could probably multiply by about a 7-fold factor, probably wouldn't have happened. So all this navel gazing, while it's important, I can assure you, I put my hand on my heart, saying every one of those decisions was made with significant amount of information in front of us and with the absolute best of intents. And do I regret any of them? No. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Lang.
Thank you. Following on a bit, I guess, from what Councillor Sullivan just mentioned, I know this item is about focusing on the building cost, and we're looking at examining the building cost down to the last nut and bolt. We're also talking about what narrative we're trying to clear out the message to the community. The big important message that we want to get through and tell the community is look at all the further economic benefit that the city centre has had and the further community benefit the city's had. We've got an incredible library, and we've now got a town centre. Point over here, there's a studio school moving in. That would not be there if we didn't invest. There's apartments, Little Lane, that would not be there. The Manning Building, office space. The people who built that said, we know if there's government workers government workers wouldn't be there either if we didn't build this. The Manning Building wouldn't have been invested in if there was no government workers over here. There's secondary services supporting the government services. So, yep, we're going to look at things down to the last nut and bolt, but for me, the big picture message is look at this amazing town centre that we've built. Look at everyone who else wants to invest in Fremantle now. That, to me, is the important narrative here. And like Councillor Sullivan, yeah, we voted on all those things, and I'm absolutely proud that we did. We've helped build a revitalised Fremantle Town Centre.
Thanks, Councillor Lang. All right, had a fair bit of debate on the item as amended, so I will go to a vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Excellent. The C items, did anyone wish to speak on any of the C items? Councillor Graham does not. All right, so I'll move the C items en bloc. All those in, seconded by Councillor Jones. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Councillor Graham out of the room. So I'm going to move that we go behind closed doors to consider. Oh, sorry, there's no motions of which previous notice has been given. There's no urgent business, no late items. There is confidential business. So I'll move that the meeting go behind closed doors to consider the confidential items. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Lang, thank you. We will wait a minute now for the live stream to cease.